It's a beautiful good evening. Greetings from Gauteng, where the weather is as good as can be. And we want to welcome you tonight on our live stream. And I trust that you are going to enjoy the evening with us. We are going to learn together tonight as we share a number of important things with you, things that are happening in the world, as you know that we must be informed. The Apostle Paul once said, "We are not ignorant of the devil's devices." You can never win over your opponent if you do not know what strategies he uses, from which direction he comes, so you must be informed. So, from my side, welcome tonight. Dumelang bagaetsho, goeienaand, goeiemense, abusheni le perile. The Lord bless you, the Lord bless you. As always, I am not alone. I am with my co-pilot, the honorable, I nearly
I
said the
nearly
right,
said the right.
the honorable Wayne Thring. Obviously, when we talk about the right reverend, I always ask the question, who is the wrong reverend? Because if one is right, there must be another one who's right. But this one definitely is the right one. So my colleague, Honorable Wayne Thring, welcome, sir, and the Lord bless you as you greet the viewers and the listeners at home.
Thank you, President, and good evening to you and to the team backstage. And then also greetings to all of our ACDP members and supporters and others who are just interested in the ACDP. Perhaps you've tuned in for the first time and you're wanting to find out more about the ACDP. Well, I believe that you're going to be in for a good time. So you stay tuned to learn about who the ACDP is and what it is that makes us different from other political parties. So you are most welcome also to our live streaming. I believe that together with the president and the NEC team, the leadership team that we have, South Africa's future is bright if only the people of South Africa vote correctly come 2024. So remember that the ACDP is needed by South Africa and the ACDP needs you. President, thank you. God bless you.
Thank you very much, my dear colleague. Something interesting I saw just hours before coming on the program is that the plan to bring hunger on earth is moving very, very fast. Farmers are removed from their farms. When there is shortage of food, people must know that it is deliberately caused by some globalists who want to control you and I, who want to control everything, who want to bring us to our knees so that we'll obey and bow before the Antichrist. And the truth is, we will not. And I can assure you now that the ACDP is the only political party in parliament, and not long I will be saying even outside parliament, that will not bow before the Antichrist. That's why we speak openly that we are opposed to their agenda, and we are going to challenge, I must warn, all those Christian parties that are coming up that are going to say we're going to do better than the ACDP. Hela, you are going to answer questions. We'll have you to speak out against the globalists, against the Antichrist, against their strategy. You need to speak out because I know many don't have the courage to talk about that. But ACDP, we understand that God did not give us a spirit of fear, but the spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. All right, before we carry on with our program tonight, and before I'm carried away, we want to hear those few people who are saying tonight, greetings to the ACDP leadership, and the first one, all the way from eThekwini, Councillor Jamil Esop. Say good evening, Honorable President, Deputy President, and ACDP family. Looking forward to tonight. Welcome, sir. And Marian Lotta, another councillor, this time from PE. Good evening from Port Elizabeth, Tebeha. Hey, God bless you. Rory Love, Shalom, Honorable President, Mishwe, DP, and ACDP family. And then Tinyiko, where's Tinyiko? Okay, Wonky, evening president, deputy president, your co-pilot, and the ACDP family watching with PL and Women of Destiny from KZN. Cindy Sibuyi, beat Tinyiko tonight. Good evening, Honorable President, Deputy President, and family. Munyani Patrick Masha, I'm watching from Sikukune. Apostle Patrick Masha from Sikukune. ACDP Emelo, Huenan President, and E. Miede Flienlir. Hey, I learned something today. Miede Flienlir. Okay, that's my co-pilot. Aubrey Bitten, good evening, President, Deputy President, and ACDP family. And what happened to Tinyiko tonight? Good evening, President and DP and ACDP family. Good evening from the Bishop Adams. Okay. The Lord bless you. I trust that you all feel welcomed, and we are going to have a great time tonight. Now, an important thing I want us to start with, friends, is that this past week, the DP was our Deputy President, Honorable Wayne Thring, attended the BRICS Parliament. The BRICS Parliament. And obviously, I was not there, we were not there. We are curious to know, what were they talking about? Are there issues of concern that we need to know about? And then we'll take it from there. DP, please come on board, sir, and tell us about this BRICS Parliament. What happened? Are there anything that we should be concerned about, or things that we should prepare ourselves for? Thank you, sir. Over to you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, President. Well, I think that maybe just a little bit of some trivia. Around about 2008, I was invited to attend the BRICS a BRICS summit that was held in India at the time, and I was invited by the DDP, the Democracy Development Program, and so attended there in India the BRICS summit, not knowing that one day I would be at Parliament. And be asked by my party also to attend on behalf of the party. And then just this last weekend, representing both the ACDP as well as South Africa in the BRICS Parliament. So I think that you also know that not so long ago in Gauteng, the BRICS Summit was held, and that was all of the parties, all of the role players, countries coming together in the BRICS Summit, and much of it was about trade. It was about investment and how the countries within the BRICS bloc could look at increasing investment in the BRICS Summit. The BRICS Parliament was more about looking at declarations, was looking at agreeing to a memorandum of understanding, and then the focus was also this particular BRICS Parliament. The focus was also on the Africa continental free trade area. So some may know that in Africa we are looking at and there's talks around a trade-free zone in Africa, much like you have within Europe and in certain parts of the Americas where they have trade-free zones. For example, Canada, United States, and Mexico, and perhaps some of the other countries in Latin America. So Africa is now also looking at a trade-free zone. So the focus also of the BRICS Summit was on how can the BRICS nations facilitate and advance the idea of a Africa continental free trade area. So one of the commissions that I attended was on the AFC TFA. So, but essentially, when we look at BRICS, what is BRICS? It's essentially an informal grouping of emerging market countries that seek to establish a deeper tie with their nations in order to cooperate on expansion, including trade. That's economic expansion, which includes trade. So this coming together of the BRICS nations also it seeks to act as a balance against your traditional Western influences. So you must remember that after the Second World War, you had your Bretton Woods establishments, which is the World Trade Organization. You had your IMF, you had the World Bank, you've got the World Health Organization. And so you've got these particular organizations, but to a large extent, the dominance or the hegemony, and so the word hegemony is just dominance, is to a large extent in one superpower, which is the United States. And so controls all of these particular organizations, the Bretton Woods organizations, and uses its influence to actually control. And so there has been a lot of complaints, particularly by developing economies, with regards to the influence and to some extent negative influence of the Bretton Woods institutions, particularly over developing economies. So your more developed economies, as an example, from the IMF and from the World Bank, will receive more favorable interest rates in order to grow their economies, in order to invest in infrastructure, in order to invest in education, and so on. So your more developed economies are more favored by the Bretton Woods institutions, but your developing and even the underdeveloped nations are punished to some extent, because when interest rates are charged and when loans are given, the loans that are given are at a more exorbitant rate as compared to your developed countries. So there was an idea of how then can developing nations come together in order to mitigate the hegemony, the global dominance of your so-called developed nations. And so it's what they call North-South. So the North nations, your first world countries, South are your developing and your developing countries. So BRICS is also then about South-South trade, South-South investment. And how do we grow your developing and your underdeveloped economies? So it's an acronym which in 2001 was an acronym for just Brazil, Russia, India, and China. So in 2001, there were just 4 countries. South Africa was added in 2010. So in 2010, South Africa was added, and then the acronym changed from BRIC to BRICS. Now, it's interesting that Goldman and Sachs at the time, they predicted that by 2050, the global economy will be dominated by the BRICS nations. What we've currently seen is that in addition to the 5 countries that we now have, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, we now have added to that another 6 nations. So in 2024, those 6 nations will be signed on as members of BRICS, and those 6 nations are Argentina, Ethiopia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran. So those 6 nations will be added in, and then it's certainly going to change the current dynamics and some of the statistics that I'm going to give you. Now, if we look at in 2013, BRICS accounted for some 27% of global GDP. That's in 2013. Let's fast forward to 2023. In 2023, BRICS's proportion of global GDP has increased to some close onto 32%. Now, BRICS has now surpassed the BRICS nations, and the GDP of the BRICS nations and their trade per GDP, represented by GDP, has surpassed your G7 countries. So the G7 countries, which is like your first world, United States, UK, France, Germany, Japan, and so on. So the BRICS nations now, just the 5, has already surpassed the G7. So with the adding on of your other 6 nations, it's certainly going to be, in terms of Goldman's and Sachs predictions, that by 2050, BRICS will be the global economic trading partners globally. So that's kind of quite interesting. Now, some other statistics, if we look at just the 5 countries representing BRICS, has a total population of some 2.8 billion people, accounting for around 42% of the entire global population. Remember that India has a population, the largest population now on the earth, having surpassed China. So India's population is just over 1.4 billion. China's population is around about 1.4 billion. Brazil has also a fairly large population of some 300 billion. Russia as well, also around there, and then South Africa at 60 million. All right, so sorry, Brazil is 300 million, Brazil, Russia, and then South Africa is about 60 million. So South Africa is kind of the minnow in the smallest in the group of BRICS. Now let's also just look at again some of the statistics, and then I'm going to try to perhaps try to wrap up. I think I've got about 10 minutes or so, and I want to just wrap up with some of the discussions also that we had with regards to BRICS and its influence on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area or Free Trade Agreement. Now, if BRICS, let's start with B, Brazil. Brazil currently is the 10th largest economy in the world. It has a GDP, a gross domestic product, of some $2.4 trillion, which is equivalent to more than 40% of the Latin America's economy. That's kind of Southern America. Brazil is the 7th largest consumer market in the world, and by 2023, it would be the 5th. And in the last decade, 30 million Brazilians ascended into the middle class. So you can see how Brazil is also just one of those fast-growing economies. Russia, the worldwide, so the second in the acronym, Russia, BR, Russia's worldwide GDP is in 2022 was at some $12.6 trillion per capita, or sorry, 12,000 US dollars per capita. And it reached 15,607 US dollars per capita, or some 2.2 trillion. So looking at the GDP of Russia, some 2.2 trillion US dollars. So Russia is one of the world's largest economies and is ranked as currently as the 11th. It has just slipped down the ranks. From about 8th to 11th because of the war in Russia and Ukraine. If we look at India, I think that those who are watching geopolitics need to keep an eye on India. India is currently now one of the fastest growing economies in the world. India has now is now ranked the 5th largest economy. Its economy, the Indian economy, is growing at a rate of some 7.2% per annum. Bearing in mind that China's economy was used to be the fastest of your more developed economies. China's was the fastest, used to be growing at double digits, and is now currently growing at around about 5% or so. But in India, with a population of over 1.4 billion, is now the 5th largest economy, and is said within the next couple of years, the next few decades, could even surpass China's economy, where China holds currently the number one position. So let's go to China. China is China holds the number 2 position. So China is secondly the 2nd largest economy in the world, second only to the United States. China has a GDP of some 19.3 trillion. 19.3 trillion. The United States GDP is some 20 to 30 trillion dollars. All right, which clearly still makes it the most dominant economic powerhouse in the world. But I think many economists also indicate the waning and the declining of the United States as a superpower. So there's these geopolitics taking place. Is it going to be China? Is it going to be the United States? Is it going to be India? And so there is this, in terms of geopolitics, we need to be watching that also as South Africans, because depending on who that particular superpower is, also has an effect on our economy. So economic growth in China is, as I said, it's 5.4% 4%. Expected growth in 2023 is 5.4%. Bearing in mind that for the last 2 decades or so, for the last 20 years, China's economy was growing at a rate of in double digits, right? So growing at a rate of between 10 to 15% per annum. It was an economy on steroids. All right, now South Africa. South Africa has our GDP currently is sitting at some 405 billion US dollars. So very clearly, where do we rank? 37th. So there are questions as to why South Africa was included. Well, South Africa was the #1 economy in the country, but currently, on the continent, but currently South Africa ranks at #3. So Nigeria's economy is bigger than ours, and Egypt has just overtaken South Africa as the 2nd largest economy on the continent. So South Africa currently ranks #3 on the continent. So President, can I conclude perhaps then with some of the things that we need to be looking at, all right? Maybe three minutes, is that okay?
Okay, sir. 2.5 minutes.
Sorry? 2.5. All right, 2.5 minutes. Now, what is exciting is what's happening also on the continent. We're looking at the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. That will allow access, market expansion. It will allow enhanced trade flows, investment opportunities, industrial development, infrastructure development, knowledge and skills transfer, together with strategic partnerships. Now, BRICS is also looking at how can they enhance the growth of the African continent, where Africa is able to shake off the shackles of its colonial past, where some other first world countries were looking at dominating Africa economically and keeping Africa in poverty. The BRICS partnership is saying it's time for Africa to find its own in terms of its economic freedom. All right, so through the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, the BRICS can actually, the BRICS nations can help to strengthen the economies of the African nations. And so with the cooperative and open dialogue and cooperation of ideas, BRICS is looking at assisting Africa to come to its own economically. Remember that Africa also holds some 60% of the world's arable land. Africa has one of the youngest populations. Africa has a very youthful population. Some 1.3 billion people reside on the continent of Africa. Africa holds some of the most precious minerals and resources needed for your first world countries, for them to continue to develop their economies. They would want to keep Africa, South Africa and Africa in economic obscurity. It cannot be allowed to happen. We have to watch, though, the hegemony of China, and we don't want to replace one superpower with another that begins also to exploit the African countries. And then lastly, President, we also have to watch what prophecy speaks of in terms of your economies and your superpowers that come into play, particularly end-time prophecies with regards to how that affects geopolitics, as well as the spiritual impact on Christians. President, thank you, sir. Let me pause there.
Thank you very much, sir. To hear that South Africa, that used to be the powerhouse, economic powerhouse on the continent, is now #3, is not good news. That is why we have to work hard and ensure that after next year's elections, the picture changes rapidly on the African continent, because this country has a calling. For those who may not know, it has a calling from God. South Africa is going to be a leading economic powerhouse, and South Africa is going to work with Africa to ensure that we become the breadbasket of the world. Now, obviously, many farmers, as I said earlier, are complaining because they are now driven out of their businesses. Bill Gates is owning more farmland in the US than farmers, and he's not buying that farmland in order to plant anything. He just wants to make sure that farmers don't have land, so that ultimately people will not have cattle, will not have livestock, but they will buy meat that he instigated to be produced in the laboratory. For those who don't know, there is now meat, red meat, made in the laboratory. There is fish that was also made in the laboratory. And today I read that chicken also is going to be produced from the laboratory. Now, all these obviously are measures that are undermining what God's plan is. He has given us land to farm. He has given us cattle, and he has given us animals, domestic animals that we can use as meat. But these guys who have an evil agenda have other plans in mind. But they will be frustrated, I must tell you. Now, the other things, obviously, that was good news that the DP has said was that the BRICS nations have surpassed the G7. Okay, things are changing, things are happening. The past few weeks, people have been asking questions, and there have been some complaints that why are African countries now leaning towards Russia and China? And we know that the US, obviously, and some of economists, even in our own country, has given South Africa government an ultimatum. Decide who you want to trade with. Decide who you want your friends to be. They're interesting things. When they say South Africa must choose between China and the US, the same US is trading with China and Russia. Okay? The same countries that are saying South Africa, don't go towards China, they are going to China themselves. Okay? So the time is coming very, very soon. Very, very soon. Because when you listen to what's happening in the world, particularly on the African continent, the West Africa, there has been a number of coups because people are tired of being controlled. You'll be surprised. I'm going to read to you some of the agreements, actually the 11 agreements that France made with their former colonies. Before they were given independence, they had to agree with France about 11 things that I'm going to share with you tonight so that you understand why so many coups, things are happening in the West, or in the West Africa. Why? You are going to have an idea. But before we do that, I want you to know that there has been, in the past few years, maybe on the 18th of August 2020, Mali had a coup, their first coup. And 9 months later, on the 24th of May 2021, Mali had another coup. Now, Mali is a very interesting country because Mali has revolted and decided to cancel what they call colonial agreements imposed by France on African countries since 1960. I said to some of our friends earlier today that I think one of the causes of instability in those areas is that younger soldiers, younger people are saying to their leaders, guys, we need independence. We want economic independence. We cannot rely on France forever, okay? And I'm going to read to you some of the things that were part of the agreement, all right? Then Equatorial Guinea on the 5th of September, 2021, also had a coup. Burkina Faso on the 24th of January, 2020, had a coup. Niger is the latest. On the 26th of July this year, also had a coup. All of them former French colonies, because the guys are becoming restless. They are saying the yoke of oppression and control and dominion, we want to remove it from our shoulders, okay? So things are changing. The fact that by now that the BRICS countries' GDP has overtaken the G7, it's going to be even much more shocking in years to come. But now, let me read to you some of the agreements so that you can decide for yourself. Are these countries having the right to rebel? Is it fair? What they had to endure since 1961? Is it fair? And I'm keen to hear what your opinion is. Agreement number 1. The colonial debt to repay the benefits of colonization must be repaid. Meaning that the newly independent states, countries that just got independence from France, must reimburse the cost of the infrastructures built by France during colonization. And obviously, you cannot quantify the amount of minerals France took. But now France say, you become independent, you must pay all the cost of building the infrastructure you found when you got independence. Is that fair? Okay, I'll leave it to you. Agreement number 2. And obviously, they had to agree to this before they were given independence. Agreement number 2. The automatic confiscation of national financial reserves, which means that African countries must deposit their financial reserves with the Bank of France. Okay? Not only that, they are obliged to keep 65% of their foreign exchange reserves in an operation account maintained by French Treasury, as well as an additional 20% in order to cover financial risks. Now, when a country is told that all your reserves go to France because you are not allowed to have your own reserve bank. None of these countries have a reserve bank. All their money goes to France. And so when they need to access that money France is keeping for them, they have to pay a percentage to get their own money, to access their own money, okay? 85% of African financial reserves are deposited in an operational account controlled by the French administration. But they say the worst thing is that these countries themselves do not even know how much of their financial reserves are due to them. Why? Because everything is in France, is controlled by the French. Agreement number 3. The right of first refusal on any raw or natural resource discovered in the country. The right of first refusal. What does that mean? France has the first right to purchase the natural resources of the land of its former colonies. They discover any mineral, they cannot send to any country. They cannot sell to any country except to France first. And after France has had everything they require and need, then they can say, okay, now you can sell to other countries. Okay, that's agreement number 3. Agreement number 4. Priority to French interests and companies in public procurement and public tenders. Hey. In the awarding of public contracts, French companies have priority over tenders. Okay, you want people to bid for tenders? French companies first. French companies first. French companies own today, because of this arrangement, in Côte d'Ivoire, French companies own and control all major public services, including water, electricity, telephone, air transport, ports, and major banks. It is the same in trade, construction, and agriculture. Something I can say about Côte d'Ivoire. In 1999, my late wife and I were called to go to Côte d'Ivoire to go and mediate. When we arrived there, we met with the then President Laurent Gbagbo, who was removed by the French military. We saw it on television. He told us the reason why he was fighting with France. One of the reasons was, France, please leave my territory. Take your military bases out of Côte d'Ivoire. We want to be independent, and we want all our the locals to run the administration and not French women. They fought over that. And the other reasons, I'm running out of time. I won't tell you other reasons, but I'll tell you one day. The arrangement was terrible. When that man told us why they were fighting, we understood. We understood. Okay, number 5. Exclusive right to provide military equipment and train military officers of the colonies. Okay? Africans, according to this agreement, must send their senior officers for training in France and are obliged to provide themselves with military equipment with France. They cannot buy any military equipment from any country except France. All right? Number 6, the right for France to deploy troops and intervene militarily in the country to defend its interests. France has military bases in all their former colonies. They have military bases. They have been fighting over that. And they've been resisting. Mali got it right. He broke and he cancels these agreements. And Niger is busy now. All the soldiers French soldiers are leaving. Why? Because the people are now saying, we want to be independent. We want to rule ourselves, even militarily. All right. Number 7, the obligation to make French the official language of the country and the language for education. France or French is the official language. There's an organization for the French language, and the dissemination of French culture has even been created. Teach people French culture at the expense of their own culture. And people are saying enough is enough. Number 8, the obligation to use the French currency. The French colonies are forced to use the French currencies exclusively. They are forced. People are saying, once us move, we are tired. Agreement number 9, the obligation to send to France an annual balance sheet and a report on the state of reserves. You don't send the report, you will have no money. That is what is currently happening, and the people are saying we are getting fed up. And then agreement number 10. These countries have to renounce any military alliance with other countries unless authorized by France. Most of these countries only have military alliances with their ex-colonizers simply because France forbade them from having any other military alliance. The 11th one, the last one, the obligation to make France and be an ally of France in the event of war or a global crisis. If there is war, no choice, support France, regardless of what you think. So, ladies and gentlemen, these things have unfortunately pushed African countries, and they are busy pushing African countries towards China and Russia. I've heard some African leaders say, China and Russia do not interfere with our culture and our moral beliefs. And they said, yet, these guys from the West, the US in particular, they are imposing their morality on Africa, undermining their cultures, saying to them, if you do not want to change your culture, if you do not want to embrace homosexuality, then no more loans from us. Then the guy said, we'll go to China. China will give us loans without asking us to change our beliefs and our cultures. So the West, obviously, I'm saying those who have an access to talk to them say, guys, you are losing friends. Stop trying to impose your immorality on Africans. Respect African culture. Respect African beliefs. Respect our religious beliefs. You impose, you are going to be in trouble. That's why South Africa must also be careful. Do not want to impose. Do not try to impose on us what is against our Christian values, because people will rise up against you and vote you out of power. So this is one of the reasons, actually, these are some of the reasons why the US is losing friends to Russia and to China. Why? Because when they give them loans and assistance, they don't tell them, tell us why you don't believe in homosexual marriages, as an example. They don't do that. They just say, okay, let's work together. Motives might be different. We don't know about their motives, but they say, if you need help, come to us. May our friends in America learn from this and stop imposing, I repeat, stop imposing their immorality on Africa. We are God-fearing, and we want to live according to God's dictates and according to the principles of the Word of God. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, having said all that, I see our Honorable Mary is also waiting to say something about the Bella Bill. Now, we were supposed to have another march this month. It was going to be a family march, and we were going to bring in the issue of sexualization of children to that. But that looks like it's going to change. And the reason for changing that is what Mary is going to talk about. In spite of the people during public hearings saying, please do not take authority from parents. Please do not pass this Bella Bill as is. Please, please, please listen to us. The committee has decided to adopt it, and it might be taken to Parliament. It will be taken to Parliament for a debate. And parents, obviously, and other things will happen. Parents will lose their rights over their children. Marie is going to give us the reasons why we have stood against that. But now, the reason I'm raising these issues to say, we cannot lose this fight. We may have to protest, go to the streets regarding the Bella Bill. We will not lose this fight. We are parents. Children belong to us. Children don't belong to the state. Having said that, and as we are also looking forward to our next march, you will know in the next week or two when it's going to be and what the issue is going to be. Marie Sukers did a lot of good work on this bill. And Marie, some people still say they want to know, why are you so passionate against the Bella Bill? What's wrong with it? Please fill us in so that when we say we are going to march in defense of our right, that's the case. So welcome, and over to you, Marie.
Good evening, Mr. President, and thank you for the welcome, sir. Good evening to our ACDP family and to everyone joining us on the platform. The Bella Bill was adopted by the Portfolio Committee Basic Education last week, Tuesday, and the ACDP rejected the adoption of the Bella Bill. This bill right now will go to the National Assembly for the vote, and of course, the governing party is confident that through their majority, they will be able
Marie, are you still on board? Sounds like she has a technical problem.
I am still here, Mr. President, but the internet is a problem.
All right, do your best.
Yes, Mr. President, and I'm highlighting again to our community and especially to Christians the importance of voting in 2024, but because of the majority of the governing party, they push through legislation that is against the beliefs of the majority of South Africans. So again, in committee, it was adopted. It will go to the floor to be voted on. What are the reasons that the ACDP opposes this bill? It is very important.
Mari, if the challenge continues, we won't mind not seeing your face. Maybe switch off the camera so that at least the people can hear the reasons. They've seen how your nice, beautiful face. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
Yes, sir. So what we're saying, the reason why the ACDP opposes this legislation is because we do not believe that children we stand on the belief that children belong to parents. They don't belong to the state. And we see the Bella Bill as an overreach by the state, only on the role of parents, but also on school governing bodies. And the closure of rural schools, again, is an infringement on the right of parents for their children to have an education that is close to home. There are a few controversial.
All right. Have little patience, little patience. She'll be on again. Patience, she'll be on again. Remember, she said. Remember, she said. All right. Children belong to parents. Don't forget that one, and not to the state. Okay. And rural schools should be open so that children in farming communities can also access education in their vicinity. These rural schools, obviously, most of them are on the farms. Farmers that have been kind enough to allow schooling to take place on their farms. Government wants to shut them all down. And ACDP says no, because parents in those communities are saying, please, 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 we want our children to have access to education. Are you back on, Marie?
I am on it.
On your phone or on this internet?
Thank you.
No.
Go on this internet. Go on your phone.
You had tonight. But unmute, Marie, please. Unmute, Marie. Even when I'm talking, Marie, and you are back on, just continue. When I hear your voice, I'll stop. Yeah. Well, if we don't come right with Marie Suker's interview, now she's gone. Let me go back to what I was saying about Ivory Coast, 1999. On the 31st of December 1999, my late wife and I and another French couple and a business person that was a link between us and the Ivory Coast government, we went to Ivory Coast on the 31st of December. So when the New Year struck, 2000 came on the calendar or on the world, we were mid-air. When we arrived there, the president welcomed us very well, and he gave us some reasons why. And I told you that one of the reasons, they fought over their administration. Some said about 80% of people who did the administration in the Ivory Coast were French women, and only 20% was from the locals. So when this Laurent Gbagbo wanted to change that, he said, no, but the locals must be the majority running government, doing administration. They fought over that. That was one reason. They fought. The second reason, the president then told us that there was a tunnel linking the State House and the French embassy. And he wanted to close the tunnel. And the embassy refused. Why did they want to close the tunnel? Well, they were saying, this is an escape route for you. If you have a coup, you can quickly run to the French embassy for safety. And he said, no, but I don't trust you. Why should I run to you when I think you might cause me harm? They fought over that. Thirdly, they fought over the military bases, the French military bases in Cote d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast. He said, no, why should we have the military bases in Ivory Coast? You have your own country, let your military go. They fought over that because they didn't want to leave the country. And then the fourth reason, they had tendered. Now, I read to you, one of the agreements was that the tenders should first be given to French companies, regardless of how much they charge them. So there was a bridge that needed to be built. After a French company gave them the cost, it was so expensive that he says they decided to ask China for a quote. China was almost 500 million rands cheaper. They fought over that. And France said, no. Remember the agreement, only French company. It does not matter how cheap China might be. You are stuck with us because of that agreement. They fought over that. So, ladies and gentlemen, the fights on the African continent, most of them, France is involved. It's something about because of these agreements. Now, these agreements, obviously, Mali has canceled them. Other countries, Francophone countries, are also going to cancel them. And once they are all canceled, you are going to see a change on the African continent, because then they will have the right to choose their friends. They will have the right to choose who to trade with. They will have the right to have their reserve banks in their countries so that they don't send everything to France and they have to borrow what belongs to them at a cost. There is an unfairness that is being corrected, and I'm looking forward to the day when Europe, hear me well, when Europe will look up to Africa for bread, because now they are selling farms, they are destroying farming in Europe, they are destroying farming. Why? Because that is the globalist agenda. That is the New World Order agenda, so that they will supply everything. They will supply everything. So it is going to come to an end because the people of Africa are saying, we are growing up. We are growing up, we are maturing. We want to make our own decisions. I'm hopeful about a great future, but it must start in South Africa. It must start in South Africa. We must have a godly government. We know that some people are saying the concept of a godly government come from hell. It is their sin, it is their perception, whatever, but we know that this country needs a godly government. We are going to fight for it. We are going to work for it. We are going to ensure that this country becomes one of the best in the world, not just on the continent and in the world. And may I say lastly, Christians in the ACDP, don't panic. It does not matter how many Christian parties are started. Obviously, that is going to divide the electorate, but please don't worry. God has spoken. You are going to have smiles after next day's elections. I see Marie is back online. Welcome back, Mama. Please go ahead.
President. Yes, Mr. President. Yes, the ACDP, there were contentious clauses that we went to war on with this legislation. Very important for people to know. Clause 27, the closure of rural schools. I've mentioned it before. Most of these schools are mission schools, used to be historically mission schools. And when you close these small schools, children are forced far away from home to go into hostels from a very young age. So children as young as 6 years old are then forced to go and live without parental guidance and family support in these big, what they call mega schools. It is a concept that is anti-family and it is anti-poor, because it is mostly poor children that will be separated from their parents. The second thing, clause 41, the very controversial clause, I have to say that there is a caveat that has been put into the clause because of the ACDP's fight against this clause. It gives the minister, clause 41, gives the minister unfettered powers to make regulations concerning learner pregnancy. And it was our contention that the minister's regulations will be based on the learner pregnancy policy of the department. And we challenged the department to share with us what the regulations would be. Well, the committee, as part of the deliberations, put in the caveat that the regulations will have to come through Parliament. Now, this is very important. If this Parliament remains with the ANC in the majority and the Christian conservative voter voice limited in Parliament, it means that the regulations, if it is anti-Christian, anti-family, and it is based on the radical liberal policies that the department and agenda that the department is following in basic education, then it means that Parliament would most likely in 2024, if it remains in the current numbers, accept those regulations. And this is even more so the reason why the ACDP must continue to oppose this bill. Then we also opposed it on clause 37, which is the homeschooling bill. And I will not go into much detail. I'm sure a lot of our people have seen the statements that the ACDP has put out last week, Tuesday, as well as in previous weeks regarding our opposition of the bill. I want to end with this, Mr. President. I want to end around what we have fought for, which is the public participation process that has been flawed in our view, and that the Parliament, the committee, has not done its constitutional duty to give due consideration for the public comments that was made during the public participation phase. It is the duty of Parliament to listen to the voices of people. And the bill was rejected on the basis of clause 37 and clause 41 and clause 27 in all 9 of the provinces. Clause 41 and clause 37 was roundly rejected by the public who participated. And on this basis, the committee should have given due regard for that. And the ACDP has formally lodged our opposition to the bill and our complaint that the public participation process was not given due consideration, and that the committee, the majority, which is the governing party, has come with closed minds, following what the department wants rather than what parents and the public wants within the legislation. And it's very important for us, Mr. President, to take the fight on for the sake of democracy, that when the people have spoken, public representatives needs to listen. We cannot follow agendas that are not listening to the voices of South African parents. So whose agenda are they following is the question that we should ask if they continue to advance clauses that are in direct opposition to what the public wanted. So on those bases, the ACDP has rejected the Bella bill. And I must quickly add, Mr. President, this is an administrative bill. It gives more jobs for bureaucrats and administrators. It is not a child-centric bill. It does not look into the best interest of the children of South Africa.
Thank you very much. We definitely are going to do something about it. We never fight to lose. We fight to win. Even this one, we will ultimately win it for the sake of our parents and their children, so that the state would never want to be a parent to our children, because children belong to parents and not to the state. Before we close, somebody asked a question, and the question is ACDP condoning military coups in Africa? A simple answer is no, no, no. What I'm just saying is informing you what is happening, about what's happening, and the reasons behind the coups. Okay? We don't condone them, but they're happening. Why? Because some of them are saying the boot of France on our necks is so heavy. Please remove this boot. It hurts. Remove this boot. Allow us to grow up and to run our affairs. And obviously, it is going to increase. If they don't change, it's going to increase. As you know, that when Niger had their coup, other African countries came together and they said, we are going to invade ECOWAS. They said, we are going to militarily intervene to restore the president that was democratically elected. It did not happen. Why? Because some people spoke to them and said, guys, are you condoning these 11 agreements that have bound Africa? And they retreated. They stopped. But another reason we are told was that because France said they were going to help assist ECOWAS, they say, I don't have evidence, but this is what we were told. Russia said to Niger, you need help? We'll come and help you. So what did they do? They retreated. Wars are caused by people who don't want to think, who just have selfish motives. And ACDP is a peace-loving organization that wants peace, not only for South Africa, but peace on the continent and other parts of the world. But we have tyrants and dictators who want to, like these people, agents of the Antichrist, they want to make things difficult for us. And obviously, we are able, fortunately, to pray and to use spiritual warfare to deal with these matters. That is why those who are saying a forced lockdown, ACDP, and I'm saying as the leader of the ACDP, no forced lockdowns. I'll tell you, I'll give you scriptural reasons why I say no false permanent lockdown. We don't want another permanent lockdown. We don't want to go back to 2020 because we still have work to do. The Lord bless you. From my side, I'm saying thank you very much for being with us tonight. DP, my colleague, my co-pilot, may the people hear your voice one more time, sir, as we are almost closing and saying to them, God bless you, goodbye.
Thank you, President. Well, again, let me close with this simple line. South Africa needs the ACDP, and the ACDP needs you. God bless. Till next week.
I love that. I must emphasize that. South Africa needs the ACDP. Hey, South Africa needs the ACDP. The ACDP. Sing that song. South Africa needs the ACDP. We might look small today, but the blessing of the Lord, because of our obedience to Him, makes us imperative to be part of the team that God is going to use for His honor and glory. I know others are knocking on the sides, but how obedient have they been? When it's tough, will they be there? We are there. We were there when nobody was there. Even in future, when the Antichrist says you are going to bow, we'll say, oh, okay. We are not going to bow. So, ACDP, South Africa needs the ACDP, and you need the ACDP. Your family needs the ACDP for you to have a peaceful, secure, and prosperous future. The Lord bless you. Good night.